I once had a professor change their own rules because of my ability to negotiate. So here are my top 3 tips for excelling in negotiations. The first tip is going to be listen intently to your counterpart, okay? Everybody wants to always be the first person to speak. You don't need to speak, just listen. When you listen, you're able to gain more insight into what your counterpart needs. That's how you're going to get your leverage to place you in a position of power. A great example is when I was working as a contractor at a company years ago and I wanted to be converted to a full-time employee. The company was on a hiring freeze and they were telling everyone and all contractors, nope, sorry, we're not hiring FTEs. Like, you guys are just gonna have to be on contracts for a while. Now, if there's one thing about me, I'm gonna negotiate because everything is up for negotiation. While I was working as a contractor, I listened intently to the pain points in the organization and I made myself a valuable asset to make sure I was contributing to resolving those pain points. So a month or two after they said they weren't hiring contractors to be FTEs, I walked in and said, this is my 2 weeks notice. Everybody was like, oh my God, what? What do you mean? I was like, yeah, this is my 2 weeks. I knew what I was doing. I was placing myself in a position of power. I already did all my work to make sure I was an integral part of the organization. And if I left, things would be in shambles. I had too many responsibilities. Of course, I made sure I had job offers lined up just in case, and that's part of the being bold. But let's get back to the position of power. 2 days later, they made me a full-time job offer. Nobody else, just me. And I was the only contractor to be converted over to an FTE during a hiring freeze. When you listen intently, you're able to gain leverage and place yourself in a position of power. This doesn't have to just work with work. It literally can work with anything. The last part is being bold, and I'm going to give you another example that has nothing to do with career. During my master's program, my professor liked to do this thing where they placed the highest performing students with the lowest performing students. They did this because they felt like it would give you insight into how the corporate world worked. Now, I didn't have time for this game that this professor was trying to play because I also worked a full-time job, 40 hours a week, and went to school full-time. The group I was in was horrible. I was having heart palpitations, like I just couldn't take it. So one day after class, I went to the professor and said, I'm dropping your class. Now, I wasn't really going to drop the class, y'all. If I dropped the class, it would have taken me literally a whole other year just to graduate. Now, I knew that the dean was paying close attention to my program at the time. And there were only 3 students in my cohort that had straight A's. I was one of them. I knew it would look so bad on this professor if someone at the top of the cohort and the top of their class chose to drop that lecture. A lecture students had previously complained about in other cohorts. I knew I had leverage. The professor kept telling me, oh, are you sure you don't want to stick it out? Like, you're really going to have to drop this class. Like that, I mean, if that's what you want to do. I said, yeah, that's what I want to do. Stood up, left her classroom, went home. Next day, I got an email rearranging me into a different group with somebody else who was at the top of the class. When you listen, place yourself in a position of power, and are willing to be bold, you can have anything you want.